So I got to know JoeDailey when I was a young faculty member, and I had the distinct honor of being invited to join the Boys Club. This was an exclusive club that met in Tom Williams' office on the last day of class each spring. Tom, Joe Hemmer, Pete Settle, Jack Dukes, Paul Rumpy, and JoeDailey. I don't know why it took so long to include a girl. As far as I could see, it only required the ability to curse and spit and tell academic war stories and bullshit. And while I was not probably as good as any of the boys, I could certainly hold my own. The annual meeting of the Boys Club would come to order only when JoeDailey entered with an attaché case that held 4 bottles of liquor. Joe would pour a wee drop, Joe would pour a wee drop into our coffee cups, then we'd turn to the business of the Boys Club, which was to grade the year and the administration on its performance. Now that JoeDailey is the last boy standing, I hope he'll pass on that attaché case to me, the last person standing for the Boys Club. I really got to know Joe when I was most honored to become one of his crew in the unholy trinity of Joe, Paul Rumpy, and me aboard the Calyx, Joe's beloved sailboat. According to the OED, Calyx means a drinking vessel. A chalice, he called it, but a drinking vessel. Apropos to Joe's sailboat, for our business there too was often accompanied by a wee drop. Being with JoeDailey on the Calyx was not far from paradise, at least it was not for us. When the wind was right, we could sail away and find tranquility. With Joe spinning stories as we cruised Lake Michigan, the Calyx is where I heard stories of Joe's childhood, where he conjured scenes of a young, poor waif from Angela's ashes, until I learned that Joe was an only child whose Irish Catholic mother believed he walked on water. It's where I heard stories of the days when the Daileys and the Rumpys lived next door to each other and hosted legendary all-night faculty parties. Some of you may remember those parties. I've heard stories about you. On the Calyx, fantasy got the best of us when we were sailing and caught up in the reverie. As often as not, we never even left the dock. While Joe labored to teach Paul and me how to tie sailing knots and then get sidetracked philosophizing about the art of teaching, this was something I learned about Joe, that he was a consummate teacher. Aboard the Calyx with Joe, it was not far back to sanity. At least it was not for us. When the wind was right, we could sail away and find serenity. Where we worked on solving the world's political problems, big and small, the plight of Russia. It's where we designed strategies to bring down evil empires, and did. It's where we imagined collective bargaining utopias of higher learning and designed strategies for getting there.
They didn't.
And when we did slip away from the dock and go beyond the breakwater, the canvas could do miracles with Joe at the rudder, racing into the wind, heeling sideways until we had to brace ourselves looking straight down into the water. One time, a sudden blast signaled the Calyx's snapped mast, and Joe snapped to attention to direct us how to haul in the sails and ties, and then sat stoic as the Coast Guard towed us back to port. This was also Joe, undaunted courage and pride, even in the face of challenge and adversity. But aboard the Calyx, it was not far to Never Never Land. And when the wind was right, we found joy of innocence again. When I was young, and here's a tangent, I was a competitive swimmer in the Junior Olympics. I know it's hard to believe. My sophomore year, I had a varsity letter in swimming. And then I worked as a lifeguard and swim instructor. I was more at home on the water than I was on land. So one warm summer day on the Calyx, out beyond the breakwater, Lake Michigan smooth and shimmering in shades of turquoise the way it does. We've all seen it, reflecting a sky blue sky. I decided to swim off the boat. Before Joe would allow me to enter the water, he made me don a life vest, tied tight up under my chin, a life belt around my waist. I believe there were water wings blown up and placed on my arms, and my body was tethered to the boat with a rope, for fear that I might be swept out to sea. I bobbed there in the water like a buoy in Lake Michigan, looking up into Joe's face.
We got your back.
I think of that amazing day on the Calyx, Joe sitting with a beer in one hand and a buoy hook in the other, ready for rescue. An expression flickered on his face between pure joy and deep concern. It's an expression that for me captures JoeDailey, his pure joy in the company of others and his abiding concern for everyone around him. His family, his students, his colleagues, strangers, local and in distant lands. As long as I've known him, Joe has taken care of everyone lucky enough to enter his orbit, making us laugh with his stories and inspiring us with his gentle humanity. JoeDailey there, so nobody steals his boat. So I know that retirement will not be a dry dock for JoeDailey. He's just beginning to sail into his next adventure.